And now we're on Lamed Hey Amid Beis. Chaya b'chlal behema. So in the Torah in general, when it says behema, it includes chaya. So therefore, when the Torah says mina behema, it's as if it says mina behema umina chaya, because the word behema includes chaya. And therefore, the word min, which we said was a prat, is coming to exclude some behemos and some chayos, but we would not say that it's coming to exclude all chayos. Amalei, so Rabbi Yehuda responds to Rava, is it possible to say that chaya b'chal behema, haksiv, in the next prat, it says bakar v'tzon, and bakar v'tzon are behemos. So certainly the last prat is coming to exclude chayos. And we're going to derive from here that the first prat and the second prat, meaning in the klal in the middle of behema, you have it sandwiched between two prats. We had min, and then we have min abakar min atzon. And therefore, just like the last prat, which is min abakar min atzon, is coming to exclude chayos, so therefore the first prat is also coming to exclude chayos. And if the first prat of min is coming to exclude chayos, then the word behema, when it says min achayos, certainly is not including a chayo. And therefore, havile prat uklal uprat iyatadon elokena prat. Okay, now we're going to go back to the sheet of the Chachamim, that prat klal uprat is derived from Nazir. Uminolon dahachihu. How do we know that you can darshan the midah of prat klal uprat from Nazir? So Gemara says the following: I know it based on the logic of this brisa, the sanya we learned to the brisa. Now we're talking about Meiser Sheni Mos. He brought them up to Yerushalayim. He buys food, kosher food, in order to eat them in Yerushalayim. The Torah says, "V'nasata akesa b'chol asher tavas nafshecha, b'bakar u'batzon, b'yayin v'shechar, b'chol asher tishalcha nafshecha." So the brisa is now going to darshan these psukim. The opening pasuk says, "V'nasata akesef b'chol asher taveh nafshecha." That's called a klal. So you can take this money and buy whatever you want. Then it says, that's a prat. You're only allowed to earmark the funds for these three things. Four things. Bakar tzon, yayin, and sheikha. But then it says, another klal at the end. So it means you're allowed to buy with this money whatever you want. So we have here a klal prat uklal, as opposed to a prat klal uprat. We have here a klal prat uklal. Iyatadon elokena prat. So here also, we're going to apply that principle of limiting to the prat. And anything that's not similar to the prat is going to be excluded. Ma prat mefurash. Pri mi pri. Now, what does pri mi pri here mean? And we're talking about what you're allowed to buy with most Meiser Sheni. So the prat we said was son and bakar. And what does that mean by pri? Why we call that a pri? Shavlad shalahem yotzim min ha'em. Now, it also says in the pasuk yayin v'sheichar. Now, yayin comes from anovim. Sheichar could come from tmorim, and they grow from what's called garine peros shenizru ba'adama. So you have the pits of fruits, like the pits of grapes or the pits of dates, and we planted them in the ground. And that's called pre-mi-pre. Okay, so that's number one. The prat has to be what? Pre-mi-pre. We'll see in a minute what we exclude. Not only that, it's gidulei karka, right? Because yayin v'shecha grow from the ground, and bokar v'tzon eat their food from the ground. They sustain themselves from that which grows in the ground. Is af kol dover mi-pre gidulei karka. So this means, let's say, for example, ophos, that's called pre-mi-pre, because they're born from their mother, and they are sustained from the karka, but to the exclusion of mayim umelach, water and salt. Water and salt are not created from a parent, or something that's not gidulei karka, like, for example, dogim, which do not sustain themselves from that which grows from the ground. In any event, what you see clearly from this brisa is that the midah of klal, prat, uklal is coming to teach me that we're marbe only that which is similar to the prat. Now, at this point in the sugya, the Gemara takes a little bit of a digression. Since we have a machlokus between Rabbanan and Rabbi Elazar about whether we darshan klal uprat or ribuy mute, so the Gemara now is going to explain a little bit about these principles of the midos. How do you darshan these midos and why? Michti, the Gemara asks the following question: klal upratu klal ke'ein prata daininon. We only include that which is similar to the prat. Klola basra mayahani. Why was it necessary for the Torah to add a klal? What does it do for us? Why don't you say kein a prat based on the fact that it was a klal and a prat, and the prat is coming to limit the klal? And the Gemara answers, "Ahani lo sufe kol didomile." The last klal is meaningful, is significant, because without it, if we only had a klal of prat, we would have said that there's nothing in the klal unless it's in the prat. The prat is completely restricting the klal. But when it's something that's ke'ena prat, it's not masha yesh b'prat, but it's ke'ena prat, we would not include it. So the last klal is coming to teach you that don't be limited to masha yesh b'prat, but rather see the prat as a paradigm of something else, which is ke'ena prat. The Gemara asks v'su, but furthermore, prat uklal uprat. Okay, until now we were talking about klal, prat, uklal. Now we're talking about prat, klal, uprat. Ke'ena prat daininon is prat basra mayahani. So why did I need to sandwich the klal with two prat and one before and one afterwards? Who needs the last prat? Because we could derive that anything that's not ke'ena prat, we can exclude from the first prat. So why do we need a second prat? And the Gemara answers, "Ilab prata basra," without the second last prat. Hava mina would have said nasa klal mosiv ala prat. You started with a prat and then you went to a klal. The klal is coming to add to the prat, and now we're going to be marba even something that's not ke'ena prat. Therefore, we need the last prat to exclude that which is not ke'ena prat, because we would have said the klal is coming to expand way beyond the prat. I just don't understand, according to this Havamina, why do we need the prat at all? If we're saying that anything that's included in the klal, even though it's not kena prat, is included. So let's take the Rabbanan Shita against Rabbi Lazar in the case of Olim and Lulavim. In the drasha of Nazir, we would have said, if you didn't have the last prat, that the klal is coming to expand the prat to include even Lulavim and Olim. And therefore the Rabbanan will insist that you need the last prat to exclude Lulavim and Olim. The Gemara asks, Umichti, from everything that we learned now, is train kloli uprate. What if you have two klolim and one prat? And that's going to be the drasha of klal, prat, uklal. And train prate uklali, and not two klolim and one prat, which is klal, prat, uklal, but rather prat, klal, prat, is ke'ein prata daininon, is my ika beni ubeni. So what's the difference between these two midos? Klal, prat, uklal, and prat, klal, uprat. And the Gemara answers, ika, there is a difference. The ilu tartin klali uprata, if you have a klal, prat, uklal, iika prata de damile afilu bechad sad marbinon. If you have a prat that's similar to the prat that's written in the Torah, only with regard to one dimension, then even though in other aspects it's not similar to the prat marbinon. So that's going to be the case of klal, prat, uklal, where we're going to include a prat, even though that prat has only one element in common with the prat that's written in the Torah. Because that side echad is enough to say that it's domil a prat. And therefore the two klolim that sandwich the prat in the middle are able to expand and include that which is similar to the prat, but only in one dimension. By contrast, trei prati uklala, if we have a prat and then a klal and then a prat, then it's going to be a much more limited kind of situation. Because again, you start with a prat, you end with a prat. Ika pratu de dami mishteit stadim marbinon, v'chad tzad lo marbinon. That the klal in the middle is only going to be marbe something which is very, very similar to the prat. And that means not only in one dimension, but one second. So what are we talking about now? Prat, klal, prat. Oh, it's going to have to be, because you have two pratim, one at the beginning, one at the end, the ribu of the klal is going to be limited to something that's very, very similar to the prat, and it's going to have to be mishnei stadim. That's the ribu of the klal. Again, it's very complicated here because there are a lot of different girsos in this Gemara, but we're going according to the girsa of Tosfos. The Gemara further asks, Michti, now that we know that you can darshan a klal uprat, is prat uklal nasa klal mosif or musaf ala prat vis rabbi kol mili. If you have a prat and then a klal, then the klal is coming to be marbe kol mili. So again, that's if you darshan klal prat uklal, and here we have a prat uklal. But now The Gemara is going to ask, Umiet Veriba, but if we go according to that Shita, that we approach the Mida as Miet Veriba Nami, Riba Kol Visrabi Kol Mili. So now we have another problem. My Ika Ben Miet Veriba Leprat Uklal. It turns out that if the klal is being marbe kol mili, that's going to be true both in the case of miyad v'riba and in the case of pratu klal. So what's the difference between the two? We know them as two different midos. Ika, the difference is the ilu prat uklal is afilu marbinan afilu olim v'lovin. Right? So if you're going to operate with a drasha prat uklal, where we said that the klal is marba everything. So then with regard to Nazir, the prat uklal is going to teach me that even in terms of the chiyuv of a Nazir, he's chayav even for olim v'lulavin. But if we have mi'et v'riba, then we cannot be marba everything, which I think he means because it starts with the miut, is therefore lulavim in olim lo. So what is the superior status of lulavim as opposed to olim? Till now, they were glummed together because they're not roy lachila. So the answer is that lulavim apparently can be soft lulavim when they're still moist and they haven't dried up yet on the tree. They're new, and you can eat them to some extent. I mean, to some limited extent. But olim is never edible, and therefore we would not be chayav because we're only going to be marba something that's very similar, and we're not going to be marba everything. So we're going to exclude olim because olim are not at all ru'uyim lachila. And at this point, the Gemara is going to introduce a brand new sugya. One of the most, how should I say, expansive sugyas. You have to know probably about 5 different sugyas in Shas. And this is all based on our Mishnah on Daf Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Rabbi Akiva says, "Afilu shara pito b'yayin v'yesh ba k'dei l'tzaref l'ksas chayav." So again, we had a machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim with regard to the shear that generates a chiyuv for a Nazir, if it's a kezayis or a revius. But in addition, Rabbi Akiva, disagreed with the Chachamim in the din of heter mitzaref le'isur. Rabbi Akiva holds that even if the yayin itself doesn't have the shear that would generate malchus, but nevertheless we're mitzaref the pas together with the yayin, the pas is heter, to be mashlim the shear. Om Rabbi Avo, Om Rabbi Yochanan, b'kol isurim shabbat Torah, ein heter mitzaref le'isur, chutz mi'surei nazir. So if a person eats a half a zayis of chelev together with a half a zayis of basar shel heter, he's not chayav malchus because he only ate a half a zayis of chelev, of an isur. And even if I hold chatzi shir asum in a Torah, it doesn't generate malchus. But the exception to this rule is isur nazir. And he ate a half a zayis worth of anovim, and a half a zayis worth of pas. And Rashi says that he ate it b'vasachas. Where's this Rashi? Psachim em gimel amid beis. Like I said before, there are many, many sugyas that connect to address the issue of heter mitzaref le'isur. But Rashi says heter mitzaref le'isur applies b'vasachas. So he ate a chatzi zayis v'anovim and a chatzi zayis of lechem at the same time. So from whence do we derive this conclusion that Yechayev Malkus, even though the half of Kazayas was Heter, Sharei Omer Torah in the Parsha of Nazir, it says V'chol Mishras, which means that you soak the lechem, the pas, in the juices of the grapes. And the Torah is coming to tell us that the Nazir cannot eat this pas that's been soaking in grape juice. And we must be talking about a case where if you only isolate the yayin, then you don't have a kazayas. Because if you're going to tell me that he was shora pito b'kazayas yayin, then why do I need the pasuk to answer that? It's also because of the yayin. The Torah must be telling us that even if the yayin unto itself doesn't have a shear, the pas is mashlim the shear. And the pasuk is telling me now, with regard to the Isur Nazir, heter mitztaref le'isur. And then we get to Ze'iri on Lamed Vav, with this will conclude. Ze'iri Omar, he says, no, it's not true that the din of the principle of heter mitztaref le'isur is limited only to Nazir. But even with regard to the Isur Bal Taktiru Si'ar, that the Torah says you're not allowed to burn Sa'ar, as opposed to matzah, right, on the Mizbeach. And this is derived from the Parsha of Vayikra Beis, Ki kol si'ar v'chol dvash lo saktiru mimenu ishe l'Hashem. So the shear of Haktorah of si'ar on the Mizbeach for Malchus is a kizayis, is hetem mitztaref li'isa, which means he was maktir only a chatzi zayis of si'ar, and he was maktir a chatzi zayis of matzah together with the sa'ar, bivasachas, and he gets malchus for that. So again, the chatzi zayis of si'ar and the chatzi zayis of matzah are not mu'uravim zebazeh. Rashi says each one is nikar, but since he was maktir them both at the same time, therefore, heter mitztaref le'ison is chayv. And we're going to see tomorrow, Masechet, the Tosfos has an entirely different shita. Okay, then, so this is where we'll stop on the top of Lamed Vav. Wishing you a great day.